Today, we are excited to be joined by Dr. Columbus Batiste. He is a board-certified cardiologist and interventional cardiologist that has performed over 2,000 complex coronary interventions. Since 2008, he has served as Chief of Cardiology at Kaiser Riverside Medical Center. During the course of his practice, Dr. Batiste noticed that he was doing nothing more than facilitating the mundane process of moving patients through a revolving turnstile that led to increased medication and recurring procedures. Hence, Dr. Batiste sought to break this cycle and promote a long-term solution for his patients through nutrition, stress medication, and exercise. Dr. Batiste has explored medical literature that has revealed the undeniable benefits of plant-based nutrition for cardiology and beyond. As a result, in 2011, Dr. Batiste established the Integrative Cardiovascular Disease Program at Kaiser Permanente to help patients with cardiovascular disease implement lifestyle change. Dr. Batiste's mission is to share information so that each one can touch one about the benefits of plant-based nutrition, daily exercise, and stress reduction, and therefore provide everyone with the opportunity to take control of their health. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Dr. Batiste.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, so you are known as the Healthy Heart Doc. Can you explain to us why you decided to steer clear from traditional cardiology and started to treat patients with lifestyle interventions?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And thanks. You know, being known as the Healthy Heart Doc is probably more of, you know, you develop your own nickname and go with that, you know? So that was like my little guise to get out there, and that's going to be my little stage name, so to speak. But I liked it until I realized that Joel Kahn actually was America's Healthy Heart Doc. And I said, oh, wow, man. I mean, what superhero has another superhero with the same name? That's crazy. But so I don't know if I should go by that or just me. But irrespective, you know, it was a series of life events, to be honest with you, that kind of got me at this point in this impasse, you know, that steered me away from traditional medicine. So, you know, my dad passed away from diabetes, actually, complications of diabetes. And, you know, I watched him suffer along those latter parts of his life. And I really just had this moment where it was just like, what did I do to help him? You know, did I do anything at all really, truly to help him outside of saying, hey, Dad, did you take your pills? Hey, Dad, did you get your blood work done? Hey, Dad, did you go and see your doctor? But neither myself nor the docs really gave him the plan or the encouragement towards a true reversal, a true treatment for that disease burden. And so that combined with just patients asking me and that coming back saying, hey, Doc, you did such a great job. You know, you took care of me 3, 5, 6 years ago. Really? Why are you back? I couldn't have done that great of a job if you're back seeing me again. And so that's what led me. And I started kind of just really reading and looking at nutrition and various things. And before it was just like the power of plants, the power of lifestyle was too powerful not to really share it with folks. That's how I stumbled on this, directly, indirectly.
You know, so we've actually read some of your articles, and in one of those articles you mentioned the forks over stents approach, which we absolutely love. So can you give our listeners a little bit of insight here into, you know, what is a stent, who needs stenting, and why is plant-based nutrition an exceptional alternative to avoid the necessity for, you know, intense cardiac interventions?
Wow. Yeah, that's not a loaded question. That'll only take like about 2 seconds, of course. But
all right,
let me see how I can summarize that real quick. So the crux of the matter is we all have coronary disease, plain and simple, right? So that starts before the age of 10. It only progresses as one gets older. Most heart attacks happen without the occurrence of any symptoms. Most heart attacks happen from areas of blockage that are less than 50%. That's documentation, that's medical science of what we know in this instance. And so where we have seen stents evolve and the treatment of revascularization, opening up arteries is really primarily, it started with trying to stop heart attacks from happening. So in the throes of a heart attack, where the vessel has now collapsed on itself, I almost think of it like a volcanic eruption that's there on the inside of that vessel, occluding it with cloud and smoke, with this, in this case, with the inner workings of the cholesterol and so forth that's there obstructing the vessel. we try and create a channel and bore open that vessel and leave a wire mesh called a stent in place to prop it open. Now, in that particular situation, that can be life-saving. But what we know is that in every other situation, if someone has arbitrary symptoms, if someone has no symptoms, but they get testing and say, oh, I think you have blockages there, and the doc decides to place a stent, that's never been shown to help save someone's life. It's never been shown to help prevent a heart attack. It's never been shown to do any of those to decrease disability. And so the real question is, are we treating the disease or are we treating the symptom? And many folks leave out of that moment in time thinking that I'm cured. My disease has been cured. I'm fine. I don't have a disease any longer. And that's a fallacy. That's completely falsehood in that moment. And so we know through a series of research that was done by those long before me that date back, that we can actually stall the process of coronary disease. We can actually regress and improve blood flow that's there. We can actually decrease the burden of recurrent heart attacks, all those things that we're seeking, replacement of stents, by adopting a healthful lifestyle, right? So it's foods. It's not an issue of good or bad. It's an issue of what foods are health promoting, what foods are disease forming. And if we adopt the foods that are health promoting, we can truly extinguish this thing called coronary disease.
Okay, so let's go back to what you said earlier, because you said that you can take a coronary artery that's been obstructed, and by optimizing your nutrition, you can actually reverse that obstruction and get more blood flow in that one particular artery. I think you also said that you can grow new blood vessels as well. Is that correct?
Yes, so we know that process occurs beyond a shadow of a doubt through exercise, that you kind of create these channels, these small areas. You have areas that are potential blood vessels or blood pathways that are there in the heart that can be grown and open up through repeated activity and exercise that's there. We know that that for sure is a beneficial effect of exercise, which is another added component. We know that through our nutrition, right? And these days they try and replicate that through the use of statin therapy. That's the reason why statins have come in, trying to see, can they regress the blockage there? That's really the goal of statin therapy, to regress or decrease the amount of blockage that we know has been shown with aggressive nutrition, with aggressive whole food plant-based diet, has been shown to do the same thing.
That's great. So I'd actually like to expand on that real quick here. And when you work with people on a whole food plant-based diet, what do you deem as a aggressive approach? What does that mean?
What's an aggressive approach to that? Well, aggressive, it's such a relative term, and many before me have already said it. You look at levels of aggression. I tell folks, when you come in to see me, if I could speak to your great-great-grandparent and tell them, I'm going to bring you inside of a room, I'm going to put a sharp object inside of your groin. I'm then going to shove in a tube inside that your artery, and I'm going to pass wires to your heart. I'm then going to channel that, and I'm going to prop it open with a miniaturized chicken wire to prop open the vessels. They would look at me and say, that's crazy. That's aggressive. No way would I ever do anything like that. And I'd say, well, okay, well, wait a minute. We can go now. Okay, if you don't want to do that, I can take a saw and I can cut through your breastbone. I can pull out the veins and the arteries from your leg, and I can reroute and tie them around the areas of blockage to reestablish blood flow. And they would look at me and say, you're crazy, you're out of your mind. But instead, what's abnormal becomes the norm. And that's become the norm, that this is the life that we have to live. And in the right situation, as I mentioned before, that can be life-saving for some patients where they have no option. It's like a flat tire. You have to change that tire in that moment. But for the vast majority, that's not the story that has to be written. And so when I look at aggressive lifestyle, I use that to give people perspective. And I tell them, it's not very aggressive. What this is saying, okay, we're going to go away from eating foods that don't decay. We're going to go away from eating foods that can survive a nuclear holocaust. We're going to eat foods that are alive. We're going to eat foods that are in their natural state. We're going to eat fruits and vegetables and whole grains and beans and legumes and nuts and seeds is what we're going to focus on as the goal of our therapy. We want things that don't have shelf life is what we want to put in our bodies, right? If it has shelf life, there's somewhat of a problem with it that's there. So that's where I start them. And then I follow that up. In all honesty, I tell them, this is paramount to me telling you to run a marathon. And if I tell you to run a marathon, you've never run a day in your life, you may not be able to jump from 0 to 100 and go directly into a marathon. You may have to inch your way that slowly that direction. But the goal is you have to get there. And for some of us, all of us, we need to get there quickly. We need to go. So if you have disease like the patient I saw today, I told him, I said, you need to be all in right now. Your heart function is reduced. You've had a stroke. I said, there's not an option, really. You've been on all the state-of-the-art medication. You've had all the state-of-the-art procedures, but yet you're still here. We have to move quickly. So.
I hope that a patient appreciates how lucky they are to have you as a doctor. Have you noticed that your colleagues have decided to change the way they treat cardiovascular disease based on the results that you have been getting?
I will tell you, that's a great question, because when I first started, it's easy right now in this day and age to practice lifestyle. It really is. 10 years ago, that was hard. That was really a struggle. And so I was not scared, but I was very nervous and apprehensive. I was concerned at that early part of my career, was I going to be seen as a quack? Were people going to think negatively of me? All of those things. But I decided to go ahead and dive in. And now, fast forward, I can't say all of the docs are advocating a whole food plant-based diet, but I can tell you strongly that all the docs are extremely respectful. They all tell patients, I'm not sure, but this is what Dr. Batiste would say. They give them my handouts. They will provide them the pamphlets. And they are all letting them know that there is power with nutrition if they're able to do it. And that's what so I have my interventional colleagues actually refer patients to my cooking class and to my health lecture series that I do. And so I would say that, yes, they've been embracing of it. They've adopted it to the degree that they recognize the importance.
That's great, because, having leaders like you who are actually truly changing healthcare from the inside out is so important. It's one thing for somebody from the outside to say, hey, I wrote a book and I have an advanced degree and this is what I believe to be the right thing. But it's another thing for someone like you, who's actually an interventional cardiologist, to say, hey, no. This is what I do. This is what I see. And this is what the evidence is to truly support, adopting a whole food plant-based lifestyle.
Yeah. No, and that's a good point. I mean, I tell folks all the time, especially those who are looking to kind of get into this and from the ground level, is the fact we're fishers, to use that analogy, and I don't eat fish, but we're tilling the ground. People aren't coming to me saying, hey, I want to adopt this lifestyle. I'm actually I have to do an elevator speech every time I'm in clinic with someone. I have to try and sit there and convince them about the power and the importance of this in a short time period, and then follow that up with other resources that are there, which is uniquely different than having the vast majority of people come to me already having read a book I've written or seen the podcast or seen the movies, and now they're ready to go. So it's interesting. It's an interesting paradigm that's there, that I think that there's tremendous value of having ground foot soldiers like myself out there really trying to impact things, individuals, one person at a time.
I fully agree with you. So let's go back to what you said earlier here. You said that, research shows that everybody develops heart disease before the age of 10 based off of the diet that they've been eating ever since, they were born. So is it possible, question number one, is developing cardiovascular disease an inevitable conclusion of being a human being? Or is it possible to actually, from birth until the age of 10 and beyond, actually not develop heart disease and not necessarily have to be fighting a chronic disease for the rest of your life?
I absolutely believe that it is possible in terms of research to validate. So most of the research kind of tells us about in autopsy studies that when the pathologists go in and they're taking a look at folks after they passed away, that they'll find evidence of obstructions inside their arteries and so forth. But they also have seen it in individuals, and this was borne out, individuals with a low cholesterol value, below 150 inherently, are nearly devoid of any coronary artery disease. Now, anyone who says 100% to anything is always lying. And so I certainly would never say 100%, but I will tell you that, yes, your odds are extremely high, that if for my kid's first birthday, instead of me giving them a smash cake and beginning the process of giving them overly processed foods on a repeated basis to celebrate another year of life or special occasions or achievements, that I then provide them with just, hey, listen, it's whole, unrefined foods on a repeated basis, that I am giving them the greatest platform to be devoid or absent of any coronary artery disease. That's beyond a shadow of a doubt, and based on what we know up to this point in time.
It's fantastic. So let's be super crystal clear, because I know there's a lot of people who are, trying to gather information about what to eat and what not to eat in order to minimize their risk for cardiovascular disease. So let's start with the foods that evidence-based science has shown to promote cardiovascular disease. What would you say those foods are?
The foods which promote cardiovascular disease?
Exactly right.
Well, we know beyond a shadow of a doubt, when we look at the standard American diet, right? The deadly American diet that's going to be focused on salt, fat, and sugar and ultra-processed foods, is distinctly associated with cardiovascular events. We know that when we look along the realm of animal products, we look at the realm of beef, and we look at processed meats, we look at even in terms of all the animal products, that we see an increased preponderance of cardiovascular events with ingestion of those. We know that when animal products are cooked at high temperatures, that increases high blood pressure, that promotes diabetes too as well, all of which are accomplices to cardiovascular events. So we know that as we increase these things that form advanced glycated end products and heterocyclic antibodies and so forth, that these things are all promoting that oxidative stress, which propagates cardiovascular events, weakens the endothelium, and potentiates heart attacks.
Okay.
So we know that.
Okay, fantastic. So let's go to the flip end of the spectrum. What are the foods that evidence-based science has shown to decrease your risk or reverse coronary artery disease? Which foods exactly?
So specifically, we look at cruciferous vegetables, our green leafy vegetables, beyond a shadow of a doubt, with dietary nitrates. We know that they actually as well have, they decrease as far as the neorevascularization, which are small vessels which destabilize the plaque and lead to heart attacks occurring, that these foods are extremely important. We know that our fruits are extremely important, and specifically our berries are very important as far as with antioxidants and decreasing high blood pressure, decreasing cardiovascular events, as well heart failure. We know as well that we look at our legumes with the resistant carbohydrates. So we're looking at our beans and so forth as far as being value add in order to decreasing the cholesterol, which also is going to impact and extrapolate out to our cardiovascular events. So those things in general are the main ones that have been shown.
Excellent. Okay, so can you help our audience understand what are the exact cardiovascular conditions that can be reversed using plant-based nutrition? So high cholesterol, hypertension, coronary artery disease, peripheral arterial disease, are those all yes, no?
They're all yes. So when we look at starting as far as with stroke, we look at the incidence of high blood pressure, we look at peripheral vascular disease. So going back into the 1950s, there's a guy who some folks may know named Nathan Pritikin. And so when he was diagnosed with coronary disease in the 1950s, basically he adopted the diet that epidemiologic studies, which means observational ones, just seeing how individuals do, and looking at whole food plant-based diet, that they had an absence of coronary disease. He adopted that and felt good. And all of a sudden he reversed his disease based upon the testing available at that time. He ran with the ball at that point. He wasn't a physician, but he began testing primarily in patients with peripheral vascular disease, housing them in the VA inside Long Beach, and finding that beyond a shadow of a doubt that they improved their activity, able to walk further, their blood flow to their legs improved. And so we know this beyond a shadow of a doubt in terms of the role of peripheral vascular disease. The one thing that's important is that it's one disease. So when we talk about coronary artery disease, that is disease on the heart muscle. We talk about stroke, that's disease in the vessels leading to the brain. When we speak to peripheral vascular disease, that's disease in the vessels to the extremities. When we speak about erectile dysfunction and impotence, that's disease leading to the male organs, reproductive organs. And so this is one disease process that's there that we can reverse, and we can stay that through decreasing the inflammation, decreasing the stress that the arteries are under, and that's through nutrition.
Yeah, I love the fact that you talk about cardiovascular disease as basically being one condition, right? And it's a question of, does that condition affect your heart? Does it affect your sexual organs? Does it affect your brain? Which tissue does it reside in? Because every time cardiovascular disease affects a particular tissue, that condition is given a new name, and it can be kind of confusing because now there's this whole long list of names. But in reality, it's the same pathological process. It's the same, underlying disease mechanism that's causing it every single time. So you mentioned nitrate-rich vegetables, and I'm glad you brought that up because, nitrate-rich vegetables have a very specific anti-hypertensive or anti-high blood pressure effect. So can you go into a little bit of detail here about what do they do, how do they act, and what vegetables can people actually consume to increase their nitrate content?
Yeah, so that's a great point. And so it's your dark green leafy vegetables tend to be in your cruciferous form. Now, the cruciferous are the ones that have kind of like a flowery leaf that's there, your kale and broccoli and things of that nature. They have something called isothiocyanates that are there that get released, and they're anti-cancer forming. Here's the crazy part, guys, about this that we know, is that, and T. Colin Campbell breaks this down in his book Whole, really about the reductionist model, about kind of saying, okay, I want to pinpoint something that's going to be effective here. But really all these foods impact everything, whether or not we're speaking in terms of Alzheimer's, whether or not we're speaking in terms of cancer, malignancy, whether or not we're speaking in terms of cardiovascular events, we're seeing that everything is interrelated. Our diabetes, all these things that are there. And so when these compounds are releasing, you have these dietary nitrates that lead to the vessel dilating, right? Because that inner lining of the vessel is active, it's alive, it's like that superhero secret sauce that's there. And when that endothelium is intact, it's going to expand, it's going to narrow, it's going to do all the things it needs to maintain a healthful state. When that area gets damaged, then now you lose that ability, and now it becomes permeable to atherosclerotic process that propagates and leads to all of the adverse events. And so when we eat these foods that now not only heals that endothelium, it regresses the plaque that's there, it allows for the dilatation by distributing this nitric oxide, that's value add, that's decreasing our burden of disease, which is really the main issue. 80% of chronic disease in the U.S. is preventable.
So you work with a lot of people on helping them make lifestyle change. What is the number one challenge that you see people face, and how would you recommend they overcome that challenge?
I wish there were just one. I think there's several. I think number one, if I had to say one, I probably would say it's habit, right? I think that it's habit. I think that where you grow up eating food that you become emotionally connected to, you now have this history and this layer upon layer of emotions attached to it. I had a patient just today, and this will give you an example, who had done exceptionally well. I saw her in a cath lab. I pointed her towards eating a whole food plant-based diet. She's done phenomenally. Her blood sugars normalized. She became symptom-free. And I saw her back today a year later, and she said that she's hit rough times. She had a lot of stress at work. And she said, I know, doc, I know what you're going to tell me, but I went to the cookie dough. I went to this, and I started eating that stuff again. My blood sugar shot back up. I started feeling poorly. And she said, I know what I need to do because I know I did it before and how great I felt. And the point is that stress is a major impetus, because what happens is when someone gets stressed, they revert back to those old habits, those old behaviors that, unless you're consistent in building new relationships with food, unless you're surrounding yourself with support of individuals who are like-minded, who can help you and point through the mirror neurons, and you're seeing other people around you who are also along the same lines of trying to eat healthfully, they're trying to live that life that's going to prepare their body for success, then it's easy to revert back. And that's a big challenge. Individuals may buy into what I'm saying inside my clinic, and they go home amidst a bunch of other people, friends and family who are telling them a little bit won't hurt. You know, they go out and in the community, they have zero resources. They're going out and they find that food is cheaper if it's ultra processed and animal because it's subsidized by the government, and the foods that are healthful, they find it's more expensive, at least to them in their perception, because they don't know how to prepare it inexpensively. And realize that, yes, I can buy in bulk, I can get foods, and it's not more expensive, it's actually cheaper. And so that's a big challenge, is the knowledge, it's the habit, and it's as far as the socialization, I believe, and it's so many things that come into play. And so that's why one of my major goals is, number one, is how do we change our urban communities? How do we bring out this new social area of support for folks that they can kind of gather? And you guys have done tremendously with that, right? That now now the world can be connected without being in close proximity. Now I can have that support with someone in Costa Rica, right? That's huge. And I'm inside of California. That's huge. And so we have to use technology in order to bridge these gaps that folks are facing right now.
I think it's actually, I've never thought about stress as being, having multiple negative effects. So if I understood what you said correctly, number one, stress has its own physiological impact on your body, right? Aside from the actual physiological impact of increased stress hormones like cortisol or epinephrine, on top of that, it alters your decision-making capacity, and it changes the way that you view food. So when you get into a stress situation, then all of a sudden you revert back to your old habits, and before you know it, you're doing the same thing that led you to chronic disease in the first place. Yeah. So given that, okay, joining a community of like-minded people that are also going through the same process helps keep you on the straight and narrow. Do you have any other specific anti-stress techniques that people can implement into their daily life?
Absolutely. So here's where I've gone with stress, and stress is usually a platform I speak on to my patients. I believe this little equation. I have to do Common Core with my kids all the time. They're in junior high school, so I'm always doing little math equations. So forgive me for my little math equation, but I believe our health. First of all, stress is our demands minus our resources. When we feel our resources are limited and our demands are high, we feel stress in our lives. But also our health is tied to our stress. Our health is equal to our resiliency divided by our stress. Now, as our stress increases, our health decreases, right? So how can we build our resiliency? But here's the thing people always speak of. They think of stress only solely in terms of life events, relationships, work, bills. But there's also nutritional stress, which is what you alluded to, and I speak to all the time. Nutritional stress is the greatest evil, because that nutritional stress through these ultra-processed foods, the animal products, that propagates this whole cycle, vicious cycle, and inflames it in our body. We have to counter that with resiliency, right? That nutritional resiliency through eating whole plant-based foods that are there, and supplementing not just nutrition, but also our activity. So we know when we don't get our sleep, sleep is one of the greatest travesties that are there. When we are sleep deprived, now our cognitive ability becomes impaired. When we're sleep deprived, now our leptin and ghrelin, those hormones that regulate our hunger versus our satiety, become altered. And we get the munchies the longer we stay up. That's there. We know that when we stay up, and now the process of the cortisol increases. Now we create this diabetic state as now our hormones are surging and propagating that there. So we know that sleep is a major issue, and the vast majority of people, probably I know specifically in the U.S., are sleep deprived. That's a major issue. So sleep is key and important. That we know that we're very inactive individuals. We don't move. Now we don't move, and so we speak in terms of exercise, and exercise seems like it's some sort of penalty. Oh, I have to go home and exercise. Oh, I have to go to the gym. But if people change the paradigm and say, I'm going to be active. I'm going to choose to walk instead of drive. I'm going to choose to park further away. I'm going to choose to take the stairs instead of the escalator or the elevator. I'm going to be purposeful in my activities. Hey, I may start a garden, right? I'm going to do whatever I need to in order to kind of maintain activity. 200 years ago, people didn't exercise. They just lived and worked and walked and did those things that were purposeful. But so those are the things that I think are important. I think it's important to take time for a thoughtful reflection in whatever form or format that's there, to be reflecting on gratitude. That when we change our mindset from thinking, I can't eat this, that's a negative connotation. I can't do this, I have to do this. It's a negative connotation which puts strain and stress on our heart. And so if we change it to positive, I can eat this. Look at how much more I can eat. I'm going to focus on what am I eating for my health instead of saying I'm not eating this, and that's where I really try and point folks towards.
I love that, actually, because there's so much that's locked up in the psychology of dietary change that goes way above and beyond what foods you're putting into your mouth. And, just like you said, when you adopt an exercise regimen, there's actual benefits for your cerebral health. It changes the way you just make decisions. The more active you are, the more the fresher the food that you want to eat becomes. And then also when you kind of take the burden of this like stressful, daily existence that we have, and turn it into more optimistic perspectives, it's fundamentally different ballgame, completely different ballgame. And I actually don't hear that many people talking about it from the way that you just described it. So I think that actually hit home for me, and I know it's probably going to hit home for lots of people who are listening to this.
Yeah, and it's really great to see you speaking from the perspective of holism, which you referenced T. Colin Campbell's book, and how everything works together. It's really, really amazing. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. You really, really appreciate your commitment to helping your patients out, and also your commitment to just teaching other people that you don't directly touch in person. Really makes a huge difference. So thank you.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. I mean, I appreciate you all for what you do. I mean, but the main thing is the fact that all of us have a responsibility, and I mean, we have to invest in the future generation, our prior generation, and eliminate that stress that's just so amongst us, and that stress nutritionally that's putting a strain on our environment and society, and it's needless loss, it's needless suffering that's out there. It's not to say that nothing bad will ever happen, and that we're saying that that the statement is it's a panacea and no one will ever come down with anything. I mean, we're alive, we're humans, but I think the key is, how are we going to live within the chapters of our book? Are we going to live a healthful existence, or are we going to live a sick and ill existence? And that's really what I'm trying to lead folks away from. So.
Love it. Yeah, I mean, your message is loud and clear. How do people find you? Are you active on social media? How do they get their Dr. Batiste fix every single day?
You know what? I am. I'm old school, so I'm just barely entering into the whole social media kind of platform, and I have a hard time picking up my camera and saying, okay, guys, here, take a look. It's not me thus far. But I will post. So I am on Instagram. I am on Facebook as Healthy Heart Doc, and I have Joel Kahn's blessing as it relates to that. And but right now, I'll be honest. I just lecture. So whenever I'm invited, my feeling is that the answer is yes, unless I can't with something with the kids, or there's something going on in terms of work. That's another additional responsibility. But that's primarily right now. I'm impassioned behind this idea, to be honest with you, of stress and in the urban environment. I feel like I really feel a burden that I need to do something inside of with the large predominance of health disparities that are out there. And so that's really where I'm kind of focusing a lot of attention right now these days.
That's great.
Really cool.
Well, keep it up. You're killing it. You're doing a really good job of trying to educate people and explain things in a real clear format. So thanks again for all your time today. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Appreciate you guys as well. Thanks for having me.